with which planet a planet is conjoined with. The conjoined planet takes on the nature of the planet he is conjoined with. This is applicable in Dasha as well, as I have already told you. Right? It is applicable in Dasha also, I told you. This principle also comes in another way by dispositors. Right? Let me explain all the three things to you. In Dasha, if a planet is conjoined with some other planet, primarily the planet will give the result of the other planet he is conjoined with. For an example, suppose the seventh lord is conjoined with Mars. Then Mars in the Dasha will not give his result first. He will give the result of his conjunction with seventh lord first. And that's an important principle. The same thing happens with conjunction as well. This is what Skanda wants to emphasize here by use of the word Tat Drishti Somya Syona Yadittisha. Suppose there are two planets, Mars and Rahu, conjunct together in the ascendant. Easy example. So Mars will aspect the fourth house and eighth house, and Rahu will aspect the fifth house and the ninth house. What a normal astrologer will do is he will take that Rahu is aspecting the fifth house and the ninth house. But the Parampara teaches us, based on this shloka, that not only Rahu is influencing the fifth house, because Rahu is conjoined with Mars, the result of Mars will also come to the fifth house. It should be taken as Mars is also aspecting the fifth house and the ninth house. In the same tone, as Mars is aspecting the fourth house and eighth house with his special aspect, and Mars is conjoined with Rahu, we should say that on the fourth house, not only the influence of Mars will come, but the influence of Rahu will also come. And this is a very important principle. From experience, let me tell you this, that you cannot ignore this principle in prediction at any point of time. This is one of the greatest parampara secret based on this shloka. If you have followed my teachings well, you know that I don't take the aspect for Ketu. Do I mean that Ketu will not influence any house other than the house he is situated in? No. If any planet is conjoined with Ketu, then although Ketu is having no aspect at all, because he is not having a face, but still the other planet who is conjoined with Ketu will take the influence of Ketu with him and will tend to give detachment, loss of interest type results in the houses wherever the aspect goes. Right? And this is a very important principle. Never ever ignore this. The same thing happens with the dispositor as well. The planet who is a dispositor for some other planet. A planet who is a dispositor for some other planet will tend to take the influence of the other planet with him. For an example, suppose Saturn is the dispositor of Jupiter. Then although Saturn being a malefic, because he is the dispositor of Jupiter, he will take the influence of Jupiter with him. He will take the Jupiter of influence with his aspect. These two principles are to be remembered. They come from this shloka of Skandahura. This shloka, Tad Drishti Samya Sona Disha. Should always don't ever ignore, right? So, for like just for an example, just for an example, I have to take like in this chart that I'm just going to show you. Taking a few examples, like in this chart, there are no children even after the 6 years of marriage. Why so? If you see the fifth house, there are no aspects over the fifth house. When the fifth house is free of any influence, you should check the seventh house for children because seventh house is fruit of marriage. Seventh house is marriage, it will also indicate the fruit of marriage. That's how we decide. This is what I will call as secondary supporting house, right? So in the seventh house, there is Jupiter. You should say that this Jupiter is very good. Jupiter should give the result. Jupiter is a benefit. Also, here the ascendant lord and the fourth lord. That's very good. You should give a very good result. But that will not happen actually. Because Jupiter is the dispositor of Ketu. Hence, the influence of Ketu will always be with Jupiter. And Ketu is in the fourth house. How you analyze this? Ketu is in the fourth house. Fourth house is happiness. And Ketu is detachment. So this person is detached of happiness, or rather say devoid of happiness. And because Jupiter takes his influence with him to the seventh house, he will be devoid of the happiness that comes from marriage. So although this combination have no connection with the fifth house, but still this combination will cause problem with children's. Right? This is the holistic analysis that is needed before prediction. And that's the specific reason you want an expert astrologer to do that. A chart needs to be seen from different angles. That is the difference between normal astrologer and a seasoned astrologer. There is no shortcut method for predicting. You have to do a complete overall analysis to see how the things are molded. For an example, in the chart of Marilyn Monroe, if you see, there is Mars with Jupiter, right? There is Mars with Jupiter. Marilyn Monroe, now the marriage. The fifth house of child is interdependent on the seventh house of marriage, right? Child is interdependent on three houses. If the fifth house is not, if the fifth house is not strong enough, then three other houses can give you children. And when the other houses, when the supporting houses give you children, then you know that with certain remedies, things can be achieved. So if the fifth house is not giving you a child, then you can check the seventh house and see if the seventh house is promising the fruit of marriage. First supplementary house. Second supplementary house will be the ninth house because that's fifth from fifth. And the third supplementary house will be the 10th house because that indicates the lineage. And the continuation of lineage is very much dependent on a child. Right? In the same way, the secondary house for marriage is the fourth house because that indicates happiness. And spouse is the biggest source of happiness or dishappiness, displeasure, whatever you say. So her fourth house is having Saturn. That's a malefic. And the malefic Saturn always tend to create problems. A Saturn in the fourth house or any planet in the fourth house having any influence of Saturn tends to give you a very bad, lonely old age. You will be left alone in your old age. Any connection of Saturn over the fourth house, aspect, conjunction, anything of Saturn over the fourth house is going to give you a lonely old age, but only when the fourth house in the Ashtakavarga of the planet in the fourth house or in the Ashtakavarga of Saturn is having less than 4 points. If more than 4 points, then it is a sure shot combination that in your old age you will have a companion with you. You will be left alone by everyone, but there will be one companion on whom you will depend and you will live. So this was the prediction that I gave to a lady who was having a debilitated Jupiter in the fourth house, but with 7 points expected by Saturn. So I told her that you will for sure have a companion in her old age, in your old age. Right? But if less than 4 points in that scenario, you are left alone. Right? Coming back to the chart of Marilyn Monroe, the fourth house is having Saturn, that too with 2 points in his Ashtakavarga. But the Saturn being exalted, this is not enough to cause disturbance in her marital life. This will only indicate the disturbance in her happiness. Try to understand something. Fourth house indicates happiness. One malefic influence, the person is generally unhappy. More than one malefic influence, the person is unhappy in every respect. The person is unhappy in every respect. Do we understand that? Saturn as a malefic in the fourth house is not enough to cause unhappiness in every respect. Add to that the aspect of Jupiter from the eighth house. You can say that Jupiter is a benefic. Why he will give such a result? But Jupiter is conjoined with Mars. So the result of Mars will come with Jupiter. And with this, the influence of two malefics will be complete. But two malefics influencing the fourth house is going to give you unhappiness in almost everything in your life. But that's not enough for what happened with Monroe. Add to that the Ketu in the sign of Jupiter. So Jupiter takes the influence of Ketu with him, and Mars takes, and also the influence of Mars with him. And with his ninth aspect, he puts the influence of Mars and Ketu over the fourth house. Now you have three malefics connected to the fourth house: Saturn, Mars, and Ketu. That's enough to cause whatever she had. Multiple failed relationship, right? Uncomfortable marriages, and so on and so forth. Right? You can read the biography of Marilyn Monroe. This is how the aspects work, and this is what the Parampara advises us with regard to. This is what the Parampara advises us with regard to aspects. That any planet in the sign of the planet or any planet conjoined with the planet will also influence the aspect of the planet This is a very important principle that you need to take into consideration while analyzing aspects. And let me tell you something, aspect is a very, very important and crucial factor in Vedic astrology that you cannot ignore under any situation. Because there are 12 houses and only 9 planets. By no means there can be planets in all the houses. It is only aspect that will come to rescue. Frankly speaking, talking about my experience, talking about another secret from the Parampara, the Rashi result of the planet completes in first 30 years. And for the remaining part of the life after 30 years, the horoscope is completely dependent on aspects. Completely dependent on aspects. And that's the reason in Western astrology, aspects are the most important thing. That's the reason in Tajik astrology, aspects are the most important thing. That's the reason in Prashna astrology, aspects are the most important thing. Never ever ignore aspects. Aspect is something that needs to be analyzed very critically. Very, very critically. If you ask me the most important factor in a chart interpretation that is most ignored, I will say aspects. This class is just a subclass from this Kandora course that I'm doing every month, right? So if you want to join the course, the description will be below the video. Thank you.